Espresso. It's the world's most unique and wonderful process for preparing coffee. The espresso process is the most efficient method of releasing the flavorful coffee oil from the roasted bean, resulting in a concentrated extract which magnifies the characteristics of coffee. If prepared properly, the espresso process will result in thick, luscious, powerful, yet smooth 1-ounce concentrated coffee extract. Espresso can be enjoyed straight or can be combined with steamed milk and other gourmet ingredients to create an array of delicious, heartwarming beverages. Unfortunately, far too often there can also be negative results associated with coffee prepared by the espresso method. If an excellent coffee is not used, if the espresso equipment cannot meet the required physical parameters or is poorly maintained, and if the operator does not understand the subtle nuances of proper preparation, the effects of these shortcomings will be magnified, resulting in an unpalatable and undesirable beverage. The purpose of this video is to provide you with detailed information about the many variables which contribute to the quality of your espresso beverage. Our goal is to go beyond a mere demonstration of the basic mechanics. We will be discussing the following: important factors in selecting and maintaining espresso equipment, considerations when choosing a roaster and blend of an espresso coffee, understanding the variables of proper espresso beverage preparation, and finally, principles of superior customer service and beverage presentation. Our objective is to provide you with a clear understanding of why these elements are so essential. Espresso 501 has been designed to be the companion piece to our award-winning video Espresso 101 and is predicated on the assumption that the information contained within that video is understood and has been applied. With this expanded training and knowledge, we hope to elevate you and your employees to a higher level of excellence through a well-rounded and complete understanding of espresso equipment, coffee preparation techniques, and customer service. It is our goal at Bellissimo to elevate espresso coffee worldwide to a level of quality seldom experienced outside of Italy. To create superior espresso beverages, your equipment must be able to meet some stringent performance parameters. The espresso machine must be able to deliver and maintain a consistent water temperature and pressure to the coffee in each portafilter. Even minor fluctuations of these variables will result in an inconsistent result in your customer's cup. In addition to the espresso machine, good grinder performance is also critical. Your grinder must be able to shave the roasted beans into consistent size granules without overheating the beans in the grinding process. It must also be capable of minute adjustments so that the precise grind consistency can be achieved. Even if your equipment achieves these goals, it must be able to maintain this performance, which will require diligent daily and periodic maintenance. Let's talk with some highly respected professionals within the espresso equipment industry to see what factors, in their opinion, are important when selecting and maintaining equipment.
3 essential systems to any coffee machine. It's going to be a steam production system, boiling water for creating steam and heat. It's going to be a heat exchange system, which water is going to be passed through that steam boiler. When it's passed through, the steam heat will superheat the water in a heat exchange method and be forced out with a pump to make coffee. And the third system is the electrical system, in which the pump runs, switches are activated, solenoids are activated, and a heating element is generally heating the water. If you can break the machine down into those 3 systems, any barista can understand how an espresso machine works.
Ever wondered what the inside of an espresso machine looked like? Well, we're going to show you here. This is your main power switch, and it has 2 positions. Position 1 feeds water into the boiler. Position 2 activates the heating element, which produces the electricity that you need to power the machine. The water goes into an intake manifold, and this is essentially the water feed into the boiler and into the heat exchanger. So I like to refer to this as the freeway system of the water as it circulates through either the brewing device or into the boiler to produce steam. This is the boiler on our espresso machine, and the function of the boiler is twofold. Number 1, obviously you have water inside the boiler that's being heated by a heating element, and the primary function is number 1 to produce steam to steam milk for your cappuccinos and lattes. The second function is to heat the heat exchanger, and the purpose of the heat exchanger is to heat the water as it's circulating through this closed loop circuit. And the purpose of this is to heat up the water as it circulates in and out of the brewing device without making contact with the water inside the boiler. The water inside the boiler is not meant to be consumed in the coffee as you're making an espresso. The water in the boiler is meant to heat your heat exchanger as it's feeding water in and out of the brewing device. That's called thermal compensation, which essentially, in layman's terms, is to give you heat management so that every time you extract coffee, you get the exact temperature. Anytime you have a multiple group machine, you always want to make sure that you have, when you're purchasing a machine, that each group is independently controlled by its own heat exchanger. Because by having the individual heat exchanger for each particular group, you always maintain that particular temperature for that brewing device. Because if you share heat exchangers with the other groups, then you're not going to maintain equal temperature between all groups.
Boiler size on an espresso machine is really a matter of engineering. There are a lot of factors that you have to take into consideration when you're manufacturing a boiler for an espresso machine. In North America, one of the primary concerns for the size of the boiler is the amount of hot water that people draw out for tea and for Americanos. Most espresso machines on the market today, the average operator cannot outwork the capabilities of the machine, whether it be a compact 2 group or you're getting into a full-size 4 group machine. The machines will deliver the steam at the rate that the operator can use it. The only time that the operator can really run into a problem is if they're drawing out large volumes of water. And so most manufacturers have taken that into consideration and modified their designs to accommodate that. For North America, a lot of the manufacturers have had to increase the size of the boiler to allow for adequate supplies of hot water. So you have larger boilers now, whether it be 10 liters, 13 liters, you get up to 16, 20, 22 liter boilers depending on the machine. And then you have varying sizes, wattages of heating elements. Now, the size of the heating element, whether you're going from a 3,000 to a 3,400 or a 4,000 watt heating element, that's all part of the engineering of the boiler. So an efficient design can use 3,000 or 3,200 watts to deliver the same performance that another manufacturer may need 4,000 watts.
Boiler size is very important because that's where you're getting your steam capacity from. And since in the United States a predominant amount of our drinks are made with milk, boiler size is important. So a large boiler is nice to have. However, you must have a heating element that is proportionally in conjunction with the size of the boiler so that you do not have recovery time on the machine. Ideally, recovery time is none. You're going to operate your machine and you've sized your machine properly. Your machine has a large enough boiler and a large enough heating element to keep up with your volume, and you don't have recovery time. Ideally, if you don't get that and you have recovery time, hopefully it's a matter of seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds on the high end.
Well, most manufacturers initially, going back decades, used a 2-boiler system. 1 boiler for steam and 1 boiler for the coffee delivery. At that stage, you have 2 control systems, 2 completely separate operating systems. Over the years, most manufacturers have switched to a single boiler design using a heat exchange unit to deliver the water for the coffee. Using a heat exchange, you're using fresh water to make your coffee. The water that you're making your coffee with has never come in contact with the heating element. There are changes that occur in the water when it contacts the heating element in operation.
Well, being that the equation of espresso is heat and pressure, the heat is being regulated by the heat exchanger, which I discussed earlier. The pressure is being regulated by the pump. And there's 2 types of pumps, a rotary pump and a vibrating pump. When you have a vibrating pump, you've got essentially what it means. You've got the pressure going up and down. Whereas if you have a rotary pump, basically you have impellers within inside this pump that is driving the pressure, water pressure, directly on the coffee as it's being extracted and holding it. So by having a rotary pump, you're ensuring that you're getting the exact pressure, which is 125 psi when you want to extract coffee. This right here is the brewing device, and what we did is we cut the metal to show you what it looks like inside. This is the dispersion screen in which the coffee, or actually the water, goes through the coffee grounds and extracts into your cup.
If you have one of your better machines, again, you're going to have what's called a flow-through head. And that means that the water does not simply come to the brewing head and stop, and thus when you're delivering coffee, it starts again. It actually comes to that point and continues around the back end of the machine.
And just based upon physics, chemistry, water going, or temperature going from higher concentration to lower concentration, that's going to have a circular motion all the time. What that means is that when you press the button to make an espresso, that first bit of water is always hot, even if the machine's been sitting for a half hour or an hour, rather than a machine that maybe is not operated on that principle or has a long supply line to that point. It might be cold or lukewarm. Pre-infusion is the theory that coffee should be dampened lightly with hot water first before your full 130 pounds of pressure is delivered to the coffee. Many coffee purists believe that by slamming that 130 psi onto the coffee, it shocks the coffee, can bring out some bitterness or some acidity. The theory was the first machines made, the manual machines, had a natural pre-infusion. You would pull the handle down, water would dampen onto the grounds, and then the pressure was not delivered onto the grounds until the handle was released back up by the spring. Now with semi-automatics, automatics, and the new super automatics, you can have that same option, which is generally the machine not turning on the pump pressure for a matter of a couple of seconds until the grounds are dampened.
Considering portafilters, most manufacturers will use a wide diameter, shallow filter. With this type of a portafilter, you're maximizing the surface area of your coffee grounds to give you an even infusion.
Our machine has a slightly smaller diameter portafilter and slightly deeper, and that's the philosophy of this company. The theory behind it all in trying to get the perfect shot is that we've got, even distribution of water across the grounds and hopefully even 100% extraction of the coffee from top to bottom, and that's the theory behind the two different philosophies.
There's two types of systems that you can purchase on a traditional machine. The first is a manual. Basically what that means is you have a button, you press, the coffee will disperse. Once it gets to the desired level, you'll press the button and it'll stop. The other type of system is an automated system in the sense that you press a button, the coffee will disperse, and it's programmed to stop at a certain level.
Today's machines are becoming predominantly electronic. One of the keys to look for is whether the electronics operate as one unit or whether, as in our case, they work independently. Again, as with the heat exchangers, when they work independently, you can have a problem with one unit and the other one will continue to function.
Okay, the steam wand on the machine is where steam is delivered for making cappuccinos and lattes. The wand generally have a bend in it, and that enables it to get into your milk steaming pitcher. You have a tip on the end of the wand, which as far as a maintenance item should periodically be removed and cleaned. At the end of the tip, you'll have a series of holes. There are two types of steam tips that go on espresso machines. And the two theories are the one with more holes is going to be for quicker delivery. For very busy espresso bars where volume is more a consideration or speed, you're going to probably have a tip that might have anywhere from 4 to 6 holes. For bars that are more into the quality of their drink or possibly into latte art, making the rosettas or the flowers, you're going to probably have a tip that has smaller or 3 holes on the end. It's not going to be as quick as this type of tip, but it's going to create a more velvety or more quality foam.
For general troubleshooting the steam boiler, there's the obvious of not having steam or having steam, which would be an electrical problem or something to do with the fact that the heating element wasn't getting power. In that case, you're probably better off calling a service technician. There's some simple things you can do. Check the power switch, check the power source. But getting inside the machine, dabbling around in high power is probably not a good idea. Something else a barista might notice is that the steam pressure has been reduced on the machine somehow, or they're not getting enough steam. Again, there's some obvious problems you can resolve. One might be that there's milk caught in the steam tips and they're just not getting enough pressure coming through, or something's caught in the tip, possibly something from inside the steam valve. But adjusting the steam pressure in the machine is fairly simple. Most machines have an area of which is fairly accessible to adjust steam pressure. Nearly all espresso machines have a gauge that you can read that steam pressure. It should be between 0.9 and 1.1 bar. And if you notice that it's lower than that, it can be turned up. It can also be adjusted up to affect the temperature of the coffee brewing. If, for instance, you find out that your coffee is not being produced to your satisfaction, you can actually play with the steam pressure to turn it up or turn it down to affect the taste of the coffee. Adjusting steam pressure on an espresso machine requires adjusting a pressure stat. Pressure stat is simply a regulating switch that is affected by steam pressure to turn on the electricity or off the electricity to the heating element.
This item is called the pressure stat. Be very similar to a thermostat in your house. It's what regulates the boiler pressure or boiler temperature. All machines have devices that look almost identical to this. The only difference might be the color of the actual cover of the pressure stat. It might be gray instead of black. Remove this by first removing the cover. Once inside, you have an adjustment screw that uses a slotted screwdriver, and there is a symbol here, a plus and a minus symbol, and by turning this either counterclockwise or clockwise, you're going to increase or decrease the boiler pressure corresponding to the gauge on the machine. If your boiler pressure was too high, you would simply turn it towards the minus sign, reducing boiler pressure until you got the machine to shut off where you want it to. If it was too low, you would simply turn it counterclockwise or towards the plus symbol to increase boiler pressure. Okay, the adjustment of the pressure stat is done while the machine is on. However, it has no direct correlation with brewing cycle, so the brewing cycle is not on. Simply the machine is on and hopefully up to full temperature. Turning this, it is not a real fine adjustment, so roughly one turn, one complete revolution or 360 degrees is going to indicate about 1/10 of 1 atmosphere. So if you're trying to raise your machine from say 0.9 to 1 bar, you would roughly turn it a complete turn.
Another major system in this press machine is going to be electrical power. Again, the obvious problems would be having no power at all, or possibly having no heat for failure of a heating element, or some kind of relay switch inside the machine that was turning it on. Other elements that could be affected by power are the pump. The actual electrical pump could not be working for some reason, or any kind of solenoid switches inside the machine or activation switches could either burn out or be affected by water that possibly could be leaking in the machine. Essentially, electrical problems with an espresso machine are service technician problems. They should be handled by a professional. And it's not recommended that any barista go inside of an espresso machine looking around for any kind of electrical problems. The third system in an espresso machine a barista should understand is a heat exchange system. In this case, there's cylinders inside the steam boiler that are isolated from the steam water and the actual steam itself. Water is brought into the machine and pumped through those cylinders, and as it passes through, it's superheated via convection and pushed through to the coffee of the machine in very small quantities, obviously, and forced out to make espresso coffee. In this system, probably the most important element is the pump pressure.
If you want to adjust the pressure on the pump, essentially on the pump you will have one of these lock nuts right here that gets backed off, and by adjusting the adjustment screw by turning it clockwise, you increase the pump pressure. Counterclockwise, you reduce the pressure. But once you lock it in, you turn this nut right here and you're locked in. You should be at 9 bars. The pump is driven by the motor, and in order for the motor to drive the pump, you need a starting capacitor. So essentially this sends the electronic impulses to the motor to drive the pump to create the pressure that you need to extract the coffee.
On a daily and weekly basis, there's some important cleaning that needs to be done on the machine. And all of this cleaning can really not be done too often. Obviously, it's nice to get on a schedule. But the important things are generally up in your brewing head. Coffee being 99% water, we want to start with fresh, clean water. So the first thing would be the portafilter. The screen or basket of the portafilter can be removed by simply pulling it out. This item here can be wire brushed or with some sort of a detergent in the sink so that it's shiny, and so that if you were to shine light through it, all of the holes would be free. That's going to give you even extraction through your coffee. Also, your actual portafilter itself will become tarnished with coffee oils, things of that nature, and this should be scrubbed. Another item of maintenance is the shower head and disbursement screen. These items are removed from the brewing head either using a wrench or a slotted screwdriver, depending on the brand machine you have. They're then pulled apart, and we have a screen and a dispersing screen. This item should be, the disbursement screen should be wire brushed to where it's shiny and all your coffee oils are removed, as well as there are generally 4 holes that can be freed up with something like a paper clip. Works real well. Much like your portafilter, you have a shower or a screen that is up in the brewing head, and this item should be wire brushed or soaked so that all the holes are free if you were to hold it up to the light. The other item of important maintenance is a procedure called back flushing. That's where we remove the standard basket that's in the portafilter and we replace it with what's called a blind filter or a back flush cup. And that is simply a cup that has no holes in it. Once we put that item into the portafilter and put it up into the machine, we're going to start the brewing cycle much like we were making a coffee. The difference here is that instead of the 130 psi going through the coffee grounds and making espresso, it's going back up inside the machine and cleaning out the internal pipes of the machine. This procedure also can be done with some sort of soap or detergent, but we recommend that on only a weekly basis rather than a nightly basis. We recommend in the back flush procedure only using a detergent on a weekly basis. There is no harm to doing it nightly. The problem is when you put this detergent far up inside the machine, you have to be very careful to make sure that all the detergent comes out of the machine by thoroughly flushing it. Most people, when they do it nightly or frequently, are not that careful, and if you're not, you're going to get a lot of soap into the taste of your espresso. So generally the 130 psi of the hot water going up inside the machine is excellent for the machine, and on a weekly basis putting the detergent up there to remove the oils out of the inside is sufficient for most bars.
Other maintenance that can be performed is to drain the water from the steam boiler, and it's advisable by the manufacturer that at least annually the steam boiler is drained of its water. Some espresso machines such as this one have a boiler drain right in the front. The drain pan can be removed, a nut loosened, and all the water from the boiler essentially drained out, thus supplying fresh water into the boiler. This is important because over time, as water vapor is constantly boiled off the top of the boiler, sediment will build up in the water, and a bad taste or odor can develop. If the boiler is never drained, eventually sediment can build up and start to plug up some of the hoses and tubes coming out of the boiler.
Most grinders are fairly similar. Some of the differences you will find on grinders are going to be the type of grinder it is, whether it's a flat burr grinder or a conical grinder. The conical being the more expensive grinder, the theory being it's going to break the bean first and not heat up the coffee as much as it passes through. Also in the difference in grinder adjustment. There are two types of grinder adjustment. One is a notch grinder, which this happens to be, and that means that we push down a pin to release the lock, turn it, and put it into the next notch. The other type is an infinite adjustment grinder. That you can turn to any setting you want without having a notch.
The basic components of the espresso coffee grinder are the bean hopper, the motor assembly in the front here, and the dozer for ground coffee. All grinders have an on-off switch, some of which are automatic. In an automatic condition, there's a switch inside the dozer. It'll fill the dozer halfway with coffee and automatically turn the grinder off. As soon as you use some coffee, it'll actually turn it on again and completely fill it to the halfway point. Thereby, every time you dose coffee, it's a consistent portion. I think there's neither positives or negatives to this. In the case of automatic, you're insured upon a consistent dose every time because the quantity of coffee in the dozer is exact. The negative of that is that when you have a slow period of time, that coffee will begin to stale. However, the most important thing to know about an espresso grinder is that you need to keep it clean. Because you're portioning 7 grams of coffee at the time, if you get any bad residue or old coffee in that 7 grams, it'll produce a foul or poor taste in the cup of coffee. So keeping it clean is fairly simple. Daily, remove the hopper, wash the hopper out with some kind of mild detergent and dry it properly. Weekly, disassemble the burr assembly. It's critical that it's cleaned out on the inside. Also, the dozer should be cleaned and wiped off regularly. Most grinders you can get inside the dozer, emptied out of grounds, wipe it off. Again, wash it with a mild detergent so that the oils don't build up on the inside and become rancid.
A grinder will never break down. You will never have a problem. It will simply wear off. The blade, instead of having beautiful edges, will become blunt, and the edges will not cut, but they will press the particles, with the result that you have the coffee becoming hotter. You can measure the temperature of the ground coffee coming from the blades, and you will see that a blunt blade will produce hotter coffee. And if you have warm coffee, you lose flavors, and you have the oil coming to the surface much faster. So for a flat blade, approximately 500 pounds, and you must change it. and for a conical blade around 1,000. So this is something that will never be told by the machine. You have to remember to take a note of that. And if the amount of coffee ground reaches this threshold, blades must be changed. And you will be surprised to see what incredible changes you have in the body and in the taste and in the sweetness of the coffee is if the particle size distribution is correct.
As we discussed earlier, the espresso method magnifies the characteristics of a coffee. This means that the quality of your espresso blend must be flawless to deliver an excellent shot of espresso. The roaster's ability to source high-quality green beans is essential. He must also possess an expertise in the roasting and blending process. A good roaster will know at which roast level each varietal's characteristics will be maximized. He or she will also understand how to artfully combine these varietals in exact proportions to create a harmonious blend. Roasting and blending are a dynamic art. Because coffee is an agricultural product, two crops are never exactly the same, even if they're from the same plantation. A good roaster with his trained palate must constantly readjust his roast and blend to maintain the same quality and flavors in the cup. Let's talk with some knowledgeable experts about the art and science of roasting and blending.
The most important issue with coffee, the starting point with green coffee, is making sure it tastes all right, that there are no defects, that it's not bad. To learn to detect a fermented coffee or a baggy coffee, which are two of the main defects. And those, again, you have to taste that. Once you taste that taste, they're rather unpleasant. You'll immediately begin screening coffees for those defects. And then if you're buying at the other end for the very best coffees, the top coffees, then you're tasting for characteristics associated with those particular coffees. First of all, there's a question of coffee species. And there are several commercial species, but only two that are important. It's Arabica or Arabica, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and Robusta. And the Robusta is used only sparingly in some espresso blends today in the United States. Almost all the coffees are Arabica.
Robusta is one of the two main species of coffee. It is a heartier plant, more easy to grow, higher yielding, more disease resistant. But the coffee that's brewed from the Robusta plant really generally has a very harsh, woody flavor. And Robustas also have twice the caffeine content of the Arabica plant. Arabica or Arabica is it's really the specialty species of coffee, or the gourmet species. There are many botanical varieties of the Arabica species. Each of them has slightly different size and shape and flavor characteristics and so on. But the Arabicas are universally acclaimed as the milder, richer, more flavorful and aromatic type of coffee. Coffea Arabica originated in Africa, and today it's grown throughout the tropics in dozens of different countries, and each of the countries has their own botanical variety of choice. They have different soils, different climates, different processing techniques. So just like in the world of wine, a Burgundy produced in France tastes different than one produced in California. Same is true with coffee, and that's what makes the world of specialty coffee go around, is this great variety and selection of flavors.
We have two different species, Arabica, Robusta, and we have two different ways to process coffee, the so-called dry, sun-drying coffee, and the washed process. So let's try to understand how these four variables are playing with the espresso. Washed coffee contain less complex sugar than sun-dried coffees. When you have a cherry that is drying from the skin to the center, you have a water concentration gradient that will produce migration of complex sugars from the pulp to the bean. When you remove the pulp, as in the washing process, this is not happening. So sun-dried coffees contain up to 2% more complex sugar than washed coffee. the process of washing is a need in area where you do not have dry weather when the harvest is there. So if you see countries working with the sun drying system have a drought when the harvest is there. And they can use this system, which is efficient in making a very sweet coffee. In other area where it rains every day, like in the equatorial area, you have to process the coffee in a way that is not so strongly depending from the sun presence. So you remove the pulp, you ferment, and by fermenting you enhance the flavor components. This is a very tricky and very delicate process because you can make errors in fermentation that produces a catastrophe. Onion flavor is due to errors in the fermenting temperature and time. But if the washed coffee is correctly fermented, it will give a very strong flavor. And it will be strongly personal. So you have each lot having a kind of a fingerprint of flavor that is very typical.
First of all, there are what I call classic coffees. Classic coffees have the kind of taste profile that Americans associate with coffee, and they come from Latin America. And I would include Hawaii, too, as a classic coffee. And these coffees have a kind of a clean, brisk acidity. They have a fair amount of body and no taste that call attention, particular attention themselves. No taste characteristics that sort of stand out. So for a beginning taster, and even for experienced tasters, they may have difficulty telling the difference between a good Mexican and a good Panama coffee. So that's one family, the kind of classic coffees of Latin America and Hawaii. The next family is East African coffees and also Yemen. Of course, Yemen is just across the Red Sea from East Africa. And these coffees, Ethiopian, Kenya, Tanzania, they have, tend to have a very powerful and assertive acidity. In other words, the brisk, dry sensation, like the dry sensation in wine, is very pronounced. And it often tastes winey. May taste like somebody's put burgundy in your coffee, particularly with Kenyas. And they'll have a fruity quality, a kind of some of them, like the Yergachevs of Ethiopia, will have instead of a winey, fruity quality, they'll have a floral, perfumey quality. And these are very distinctive coffees. Then the next family, I think, would be the Asian coffees. India usually doesn't like to get put together with Indonesia and other parts, but nevertheless, in a taste profile, they're similar. The South Indian coffees and Indonesian coffees, which would be Sumatra, Celebes or Sulawesi, Java. These coffees, there is the heavy body, a heavy resonant depth to the taste is what characteristic of these coffees. And again, they're very complete. They have acidity, sometimes it's winey, but it's a very deep, resonant, sometimes sweet taste. The last family, which some people wouldn't differentiate from other Latin American coffees, are Caribbean coffees, which tend to be sweet, mellow, complete coffees, but not the kind of very assertive, dry acidity that you find in coffees from the best Latin American places like Colombia and Costa Rica. It's kind of a softer, mellower coffee. It's true of Kona as well. They're island coffees. They're coffees that are grown close to the coast. There's more moisture. They just tend to be sweeter and more rounded. So those are the four families that I would think about in buying coffee.
There is no question about it that because countries have different geographical patterns, because topological characteristics change, because of social, cultural, and economic and political characteristics change and shape the methods of workmanship in cultivation, in harvesting, in picking, in the selection of species, in the rotation of those selections. There's no question about it that because of climatic conditions, topology, geography, and working methods, there are going to be differences within varietals from the 4 different continents or from the 80 different countries. But the same is also true, that the same differences or more are going to be found within one country and within different regions of their country, or even in more depth within different farmers on the same hillside within 2 miles apart. So my point being, while we all understand and appreciate that Indonesian coffees give us a caramelized, supposedly a caramelized, generally speaking, flavor, a syrupy caramelized, and many of your African coffees give us a snappy acidity that is wonderful as a balance in a complete flavor of a coffee. While we understand these genetic, general characteristics or characters of a coffee, we must understand that when it's all said and done, we as roasters, yes, should direct our thoughts in the direction of those individual standardized notions. But as we're getting involved in the actual tasting process of coffees that, yes, were possibly requested from Africa, from Indonesia, from Central and South America, from the Pacific Islands, as we choose coffees from those different continents and those different countries based on general guidelines, we must understand that at the end, when we taste those coffees, they have to be tasted blind. I do not believe that any roaster should know what he or she is tasting prior to purchasing a coffee. That choice of buying or not buying should be made or should not be made based on taste alone. In roasting, we're doing 3 basic elements. All of our coffee roasters are doing 3 basic elements. We are creating chemistry, thermochemistry exchanges between foods. Anytime we cook, there's chemistry. I don't understand all that chemistry. We go by knowledge, experience, and taste. But that chemistry with the same cooks or the same chefs, the same ingredients and the same machine, simply by changing the roasting times and the roasting temperatures and how you hold those temperatures when you increase and when you decrease and how you hold them will make a huge difference with the same ingredients, with the same person, with the same roasting machine. So we're dealing with chemistry. I don't believe there is room in my mind for getting too involved with chemistry. But there has to be room in understanding the appreciation for the fact that there is chemistry evolved in coffee roasting, and I want to know about it, not from the standpoint of formulas, but from the standpoint of practical reality. As we change these things over the years, we write notes and we learn and we evolve and we understand what can happen in the roasting process from chemistry that makes a difference in taste. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens within the roasting process to all of us roasters is we are taking the coffee beans which have natural sugars in them, and we're creating cross links of sugars so that we are initiating a caramelization process. Very similar as if you take sugar and put it on a pan over the stove and you cook it over heat. You're caramelizing the sugars. As you're caramelizing the sugars, you're bringing certain elements of sweetness into the coffee, and you're also changing the color of the coffee. The darker the coffee is roasted, the more caramelization. Eventually, however, you will reach a point where you start also introducing carbonization. And I would assume that the goal of most roasters should be to caramelize the product to whatever individual level of belief caramelization is enough for that particular given varietal, as you roast coffees individually by the varietal. Caramelize the sugars to a point where you have as little carbonization as possible, because carbonization will impart a certain flavor and a certain structure to the bean that when mixed with the whole process of roasting, for instance, let's just take temperature. As you have carbonization and you have hydraulic pressure from within the beans that through carbon dioxide, which is a gas, pushes oils to the surface. And as you have more and more oils come to the surface and you have more and more carbonization of those oils and those elements, you have an environment within the roasting chamber that will impart certain flavors that in my mind will usually be negatory, will usually be negative. Flavors that are extremes, flavors that could be smoky, flavors that could introduce a carbonized, smoky, bitter flavor. Flavors that do not give anything positive to the blend of flavors you're looking for. So caramelization, carbonization, very, very important. Understanding of that is very, very important. And the understanding and the appreciation of the migration of coffee oils and how that occurs over a certain period of time is just as important in coffee roasting. So ingredients and roasting. The last one is blending. As varietals have taken much more of a foothold, blending at times has been looked down. I refuse to believe that blending has to be looked down, has to be as a venue, supposedly a venue of quote-unquote cheapening varietals. I believe, in fact, just the opposite. I believe that it is only good varietals, as chosen by taste, that when placed together can give us in harmony and an orchestrated flavor that, when found in a blend, cannot be possibly matched by any singular varietal. It is the synergy of the varietals that in a blend give us the complexity and put the finishing touches of art on our individual piece. It is through blending that we create taste as a chef, through the recipe, creates the final taste. It is through blending that we not only create taste, but we keep taste consistent as nature changes on us. We're not dealing with plastic, we're dealing with nature. We're dealing with nature with love, with passion, with knowledge, with professionalism. And blending becomes a tool that we can shift percentages as nature changes on us. So the art and the profession for a roaster involves buying with your senses, roasting with your senses, and blending for taste with your senses. At the end, you have a product that is a signature of what you're all about as an individual and as a professional.
Of all the factors contributing to the creation of superior espresso beverages, it is our opinion that none is as important as understanding the subtle nuances of proper preparation. The barista's knowledge of and adherence to these principles of proper preparation are critical to the consistent production of wonderful espresso beverages. We will now discuss in detail the many factors related to proper espresso preparation and gain an in-depth understanding as to why these variables are so important.
There's a challenge faced by the espresso side of the coffee business. It certainly is quality. I mean, espresso, as markets mature, people, and it's not a novelty, and people aren't drowning their espresso in flavored syrups, they're going to want a better and better product. And to produce a really fine, perfect pull of espresso is not, well, use a cliche, it's not rocket science, but it is a craft, and a very satisfying craft. And it requires training, it requires care, and it requires persistence, a consistent ritual. And beyond that, it requires flair, ultimately. It's a wonderful piece of theater if it's done right. But above all, the shot, the espresso shot that's the heart of the beverage has to be done right. And probably in 80% of, or I would say 90% of the shots pulled right at this moment in the United States are terrible. And so we obviously have to pay tremendous attention to that. And as I've said, we don't want to get intimidated by nitpicking kind of sniffy connoisseurs, but on the other hand, we want the fundamental knowledge of what a good shot is and the ability to produce it consistently.
Specialty coffees is another venue, another direction in the culinary arts. And the biggest hurdle to overcome prior to getting to the excellent standards of quality is getting over a mindset that coffee is coffee. That coffee is coffee, and it doesn't matter how you do it, because it's going to be topped with X number of ounces of milk and or a diversification of menu planning that will cover up the coffee. The mindset should be, in my mind, not the coffee is coffee, but the coffee is the foundation, is a pillar of the taste that will be in the end, in the final cup to be served to your customers. They will give you pride. They will give you pride in your heart, in your mind, in order to appreciate it for what it is, whether it gets mixed with milk, syrups, or not. It needs to be made at its best from the very foundation of it all, which is the coffee. And so in order to do that, we must have an appreciation for the culinary arts. We must be chefs. We can be cooks, we must be chefs. And that requires, first and foremost, in America, we must understand a new lingo, a new language of foods. Never mind a new language of wet espresso, un cappuccino, un latte, ristretto macchiato, and un caffè con panna may mean. Never mind literally a new language, but a new language in the heart, in the mind, of what food means to us, or what culinary arts means to us. In this case, culinary arts in coffee means not just filling our stomach, it means an appreciation over time with friends as a total coffee experience. With just half an ounce of liquid, it condenses down to that.
Why is espresso different from brewed coffee? This is your question. Because of the complexity of espresso. Brewed coffee is just a solution in which molecules of stuff that are coming from the caramelization are dissolved into the water. Espresso is a polyphasic system, we say as scientists, which means that it has many phases. It has the solution as the brewed coffee, but it is also a suspension. You have small particles swimming around. You have an emulsion, oil droplets swimming around, and you have a foam. This complexity is responsible for the unique body, aftertaste, intense flavor that is trapped in the foam. And it makes espresso something that is now capturing the attention of mainly the younger population, simply because they are so strongly attracted by some aesthetical enjoyment. You don't drink espresso for physiology, because the quantity of liquid is so tiny, and the amount of caffeine is low. In espresso, that is prepared in a very short time, between 20 and 30 seconds, you transfer approximately 65 to 75 of the available caffeine into the brew. So an espresso made with Arabica contains approximately 60 milligrams, which is the amount of caffeine that you have in a glass of Coke. When we are able to extract approximately 25% of the substances that are present in the ground bed of coffee in only 25 seconds, this is a sign that you have a very efficient system of extraction. This is due, one side, from the high pressure that the espresso machine applies and the relatively high temperature, but it is also due to the big surface that the bed of particles is offering to the passing water. If we check the particle size distribution of coffee ground for espresso correctly, we have approximately 5 million particles per gram of coffee. So I think that the importance of the grinder must be always underlined. These important points: why is the grinding changing from one day to the next? So what happened? The blades are having the same distance, everything is the same, the coffee from the funnel is the same, and suddenly, yesterday I had a percolation time perfect, 30 seconds, and today I measure 20 seconds. What changes? What is changing is the brittleness of the coffee. Roasted coffee, if it is not cooled with water, which is frequently the case, is very brittle and very hygroscopic. Fresh and dry espresso beans are behaving like bread coming from the oven. They have a crust that is very brittle and very crusty. And the same is true for the espresso, for the bean of coffee. If we leave the bread in the air, and if we leave the beans in the air, they will absorb moisture from the air. And the result of that will be a change in the brittleness. So the particle size distribution that yesterday with the dry coffee was perfect, today, having the coffee absorbed water from the air, it will become tougher, harder, and we will have a coarser ground. This explains why in certain areas, for instance in the harbors, on the sea, in the night you have the wind coming from the mountains and it is dry air. So the coffee will be brittle and will produce a fine particle size distribution. During the day you have the wind coming from the sea carrying a lot of moisture, the coffee will become humid and you have to change the grinding degree. So in the evening the wind changes again and you will have to adjust. So this is explaining why frequently you have only to change one notch. It is not so big, the difference. But one notch makes 0.02 of a millimeter change in the distance of the blade, and it will affect strongly the particle size distribution. What is a proper extraction? The proper extraction is the result of a certain unbalance between the pressure applied by the water on the bed of the particles in the basket and the resistance of the basket and the bed of particles. This unbalance must be very small because the resistance, if the resistance is too low, like a bed of particles that are too coarse or not damped, you have a very fast flow. And if the flow is too fast, you have no extraction. You have just colored water. So the way you balance the resistance of the bed of particles in the basket to the big pressure applied by the pump of the machine is by having the proper particle size distribution and having these particles properly tamped. There is a discussion about should we tamp or not. Some people say the strong pressure of the water will tamp, but it is not true, because the water is not coming as a piston, but as a multitude of microscopic channels, and these channels, if the particles are not bound together, will move the finer and they will be washed down. Sedimentation is the result of that on the bottom of the basket, producing a thin layer of particles that will practically filter the water. And if this filtering occurs, you remove from the espresso flowing through the basket the oil fraction, finely emulsified, that is the flavor carrier and the body producer. So tamping is of major importance. If you tamp strongly, and you have to tamp with all your force, you have to apply possibly 50 pounds to the particles, they will not only become closer and have a filling, space filling higher than 37%, but they will also stick one to the next. The particles are covered with oil. We must always focus on the big importance of oil in roasted coffee. In Arabica, oil represents up to 18% of the total amount of solids. And this oil is sticky. It has the consistency and the stickiness of honey. So it will work as a beautiful glue. Particles will stick one to the other and they stay there because of the adhesive force of the oil. So this will produce not a cluster of loose particles, but a bed of compacted and adherent particles that will offer to the flowing water a resistance that is the needed value for compensating the pressure of the water flowing through. This is an equilibrium that must be carefully cared, because only by having a perfect balance between the pressure applied and the resistance of the bed of particles in the basket, you have a correct flow. Again, I remember, an espresso is a solution, is an emulsion, is a suspension, and it is a foam. When we watch an espresso well prepared and you have this kind of a tiger skin effect, these are particles, small, very tiny particles of ground coffee that are coming with the foam to the surface. And if you let the foam stay there for a while, you will see that the foam turns darker. This is because the bubbles that are bursting will put the solid particles more visible, and the color will be changing due to that. This complexity is also the responsible for the perception. An espresso is not only a pleasure when you drink it. It is a pleasure for a long, long time. It has after flavor and aftertaste. What causes that is mainly the emulsified oil. Espresso contains around 0.1 gram of oil that is dispersed in billions of droplets that are below 5 microns. When something is present in a liquid at a dispersion dimension lower than 5 micron, we speak of a colloidal condition. So we normally think that nature is liquid and solid. No, there is an intermediate situation, the colloidal situation, that can be a solid or a liquid dispersed in another liquid in sizes below 5 microns. When this size is achieved, you will find and see with a microscope Brownian motion. And if you have a drop of espresso under a microscope with a strong magnification, you need 1,000 times the magnification, you will see the little droplets dancing because the thermal agitation of the water molecules kick them around and they move in a kind of a magic dance. This is to be seen only in espresso. If you look to a drop of regular coffee, you will see some drops of oil, but they are very large. So they are probably 300, 500 microns. They do not make the magic dance, and if you drink it, you get it immediately in your stomach. The very tiny particles, droplets of oil, well emulsified, they enter into the taste buds of our tongue, and they stick there for half an hour or more. So if the espresso is good, this long-lasting aftertaste and after flavor is a wonder. But if it is bad, you have hard time. If you look with a microscope to the crema, you see larger bubbles that contain mainly carbon dioxide, that is the gas that is developing during the roasting in the cell. This gas is in the cell at very high pressure, up to 350 psi. And with this gas, we have a combination, a cocktail of some 1,200 components that are those that we say our nose perceives, and they are responsible for the flavor. This cocktail shows volatiles that can boil below zero, other that boil high temperature. So you have a very complex combination of components that are responsible for the perception of our nose. This component in a coffee that is brewed where no foam exists will go into the air and you will smell. But what is in the air is not in your cup. The espresso does not allow these volatiles to evaporate simply because the foam is trapping them and the concentration is high. This explains why espresso can be made only with perfect beans. If you have a slightest imperfection, the concentrating effect of the foam will produce the perception of this defect. A defective bean that is absolutely acceptable for regular coffee, which is more diluted and leave the volatiles escape easily, cannot be accepted for making an espresso. Now people know that Robusta is making foam easier than Arabica, and this is why frequently espresso coffee is a blend of Robusta and Arabica. Our company we use only Arabica, but it is very difficult to make an espresso having a rich body and a rich foam with only Arabica. What is the difference between Arabica and Robusta? There are two different species. Robusta has 22 chromosomes, Arabica 44. It's like a cat and a dog, so they cannot match. But there are also many differences in the chemical composition. And for instance, Robusta contains more caffeine and more chlorogenic acid and less oil and less sugars. Forget the numbers. Caffeine in Robusta between 2.5 and 3.5 and even more. Oil around 8–9%. Sugar around 5%. Arabica, to the contrary, has up to 18% of oil, a content of caffeine around 1.3, and sugars up to 8%. The biggest difference is in caffeine content and sugar, and the oil content. So when we see the facility by which Robusta is foaming, it is because oil and foam are enemies. When we try to understand what is causing the foam, we wanted to have a study on the surfactant in the coffee. So we went first to the big data banks to look if something was done scientifically in this area. Nothing on coffee and foam. A lot on foam and beer. And you learn from this work, big scientific work, that if you want to kill the foam in a beer, you just have a drop of oil and it's gone. So the oil is killing the foam. And in this case, the high content of oil in Arabica is making the foaming of Arabica difficult. Contrary to that, Robusta, containing less oil, is making a foam that is much easier to achieve. Logically, you pay the price of the flavor, because due to the concentration and the foam trapping the flavor, the Robusta flavor is also amplified. And the Robusta flavor is not the best flavor in coffee.
This is simple. It's easy, given you do it for the right intent and from the heart, and given you're willing to give it time to learn and to evolve with experience. And given that you do it with the marriage of, yes, some technical knowledge of equipment, whether you're a barista or a coffee roaster, yes, you must have some technical knowledge and technical appreciation of how equipment works. But you have to marry that with the passion, with the knowledge, with experience. And you have to marry that so that at the end, you get to a flavor of espresso, for instance. There is a complex flavor. To a flavor that when people taste it, they say, whether they like it or not, they say, it is a complex flavor. It gives us an array of characters that we can feel everywhere in the top of our palate, on the sides, in the back of the esophagus. It is a complete complex flavor. It's not single spectrum. It is not something that hits you in one area and it's gone. It doesn't just get into your mouth and hits you in one particular side of your palate. It's fully dimensional. You may like it, you may not like it, but it's fully dimensional. It comes at you from different angles. And when it's all said and done, it's the synergy of all these different flavors that you develop with knowledge and passion. You develop with some technical background. It is that harmony of this balance and synergy of those that bring a product, or should bring a product, that is balanced, that is not offensive, that, as in wines, can be married within the menu with other foods and complement the foods. And vice versa, the foods can complement the wine or the coffee. It is not extreme. It is not single-dimensioned. It is not offensive. It does not make you go, ow. It makes you go, Madonna, it's beautiful. Something that can go beyond just an espresso. Something that gives you a total coffee experience to start with in your taste buds. And total coffee experience has to be one that hits you, your palate, your nose, your eyes, that fills all of your senses. So when we're tasting espresso, yes, it's got to have crema. Yes, it's got to have horizontal and vertical crema. But what good does it do us if it's got an immense amount of crema, and then it has got a very singular spectrum of taste, or if it's sharp, or if it's bitter, or if it's so acidic that you cannot get it down unless you close your eyes a few times. So you must make your senses happy, starting with your eyes. You must make your nose happy with the aroma. You must fill your palate. And you must make your ears happy from your own sounds, from your heart, and from your words. They say, this has been a total coffee experience. It's beautiful. It's balanced. It is balanced.
There's been many circumstances where people, bankers, real estate folks, landlords, and potential investors have suggested that the quality of the product really isn't the reason why customers are going into particular stores, that there's other reasons, that it's a whole phenomenon of people following people or trying to be trendy. And part of that comes from the fact that it's very difficult for people, all people, to describe aroma, flavor, and the impact it's having upon them as far as the decisions that they're being made. So it's difficult to objectively counter somebody's claim that they're not in here because your coffee tastes better than your competitors. But in my years of experience, I still absolutely maintain that quality is essential to success. That the customers can tell the difference. Their feet will make the choice as to which shop they go in on the basis of quality of the product and quality of the service.
Superior beverage quality is only half of the equation necessary in building a vibrant specialty coffee business. Customer service is the other half. The people who prepare your beverages and serve your customers are an important factor to the success of your operation. Your employees must possess a genuine love of people and a desire to serve others. They must also be dedicated to perfection and have pride in the products they prepare and serve. In Italy, espresso beverages are revered as a culinary art form. The old adage, you eat with your eyes, is quite true. A beautiful beverage excites and entices the senses. Obviously, the flavors, aromas, and textures must reinforce what the eyes perceive. The extra effort to present a visually appealing drink is the ultimate expression of one's pride in their craft. Let's discuss the attitude and actions which define superior customer service and explore a presentation technique which will enhance the appearance of your beverages.
Well, customer service is critical for obvious reasons. Frequently, when somebody comes into a cafe, whoever's working behind the counter is the first person that they're dealing with at that time in the morning. And so if they have a negative experience, even if the product is excellent, I doubt that they'll come back if they have a very negative experience with the person behind the counter. So there are a lot of elements involved in customer service. Certainly the way that the beverage is prepared, how well it tastes, how it's presented and served to the customer is going to be critical in determining whether or not that customer comes back for another drink. When you're hiring people that are going to be working behind your bar, you want to make sure that you hire people that are as enthusiastic and passionate about the product as you are. You might be getting into this industry because you love wonderful coffee and you've heard that it's a great opportunity, and so you certainly bring a fair amount of passion to it. But as you expand and grow and you hire new people, it's critical to make sure that you hire people that are as excited about it as you are. You can train them how to make good coffee, but you can't train somebody to have a good personality. So somebody with a bubbly, effusive personality that's going to interact with your customers, who's going to suggestively sell products, answer any questions or anticipate any questions, is critical to ensuring that you have a good repeat clientele that goes out of their way to come back to your business, maybe drives past 2 or 3 other coffee outlets to come to your place because they get a warm, comfortable feeling when they walk in.
Now there's places that can have great quality of product and the service is non-existent. And that place is going to have a tough time succeeding for a couple of reasons. One is service in our industry is 2 things. The friendliness or the compassion that's shared and experienced, the relationship between the customer and the staff. And the other, of course, is efficiency and speed. And our business is about huge cycles, points of the day where you've got lines to the door and out the door. And if you as an operator are successful in driving those customers very fast through the process of fulfilling their orders, then that many more people will not only come during that period of time, but also will bring themselves back during the low points of time. So your upper cycles, the higher capacity that you have, drive all of your revenues and sales. And it's a trick. You've really got to manage your operations such that you can have people standing in line for no more than two minutes at most. And the product that they get is the product that they wanted. And that's a service-oriented management that needs a tremendous amount of focus on the part of the people responsible for training the staff, integrating the staff, finding what are the key capabilities of each of the staff, and forming a team that works really well together.
One of the misconceptions around service, good, solid customer service, is that anybody can do it. And sometimes an owner will step to the line to provide customer service when he really is the person that maybe should be organizing all the books and doing whatever. Maybe he's the person, you need to find a personality that can do it. The contact between who is ever behind the counter and the customer approaching on the other side of the counter is where the business happens. That is a vital moment of contact. Without that, there is no point. So the whole thing comes together. You've got somebody that you're paying minimum wage and relying on that person to, in a sense, build the success or failure of your business. It all rides right there. Whatever you do, no matter how much money you put in your business, how much caring you put in, how much passion you've got, you're relying on that person. Some owners are in love with coffee, but not necessarily people person. Doesn't mean they don't like people, but it may not be their skill. So it's identifying who's best to do that, and do they have the passion, the heart, the understanding to make that contact to build the business. And that's where a lot of businesses come up short. It has to be a hands-on, real relationship between that guy and the customer. And it's more than what you handing a napkin, handing a straw, handing a great drink, and all those things have to be consistent, has to be congruent. But it's also in an attitude. It's in making eye contact with someone. It is, have a nice day, and we always get that. We get the little warm little things. But when you make eye contact with a friend, when you look at somebody and say, this is excellent, you're really going to love this. I took some extra time to prepare it. Or, have you ever seen a really good shot? This is what it looks like. And you educate a customer. 30-second vignette of information can make all the difference in the world. And ask yourself, how many times when you go to get a cup of coffee, when you go to get a sandwich, whatever it is, how many times does somebody tell you what went into it? How many times does somebody not even know what kind of coffee they're serving? How many times do you get somebody that makes eye contact with you and gives you the kind of gesture that leaves you feeling warm? I believe in the total coffee experience, where they get an exceptional product that is for all the right reasons excellent. It tastes good, it looks good, it's drinkable, it's all those things. Shared information, where you've given them some solid, here's how, here's why, I care about you. That's a gesture anytime you give information. So that occurs. And then the service that binds it, the handing them of the napkin, the real. Can you do that with a line of people in your store? You bet. You can give knowledge to a group of people, treating them as one. You can make eye contact with each person and say, hi, it's good to see you. I look for tomorrow when you come in, I've got something I want to share with you. It doesn't take any time to do that, and to personalize that, what is a generalized dialogue perhaps, but to personalize it so everybody feels special. You can't roll the dice on that. They are your financial partner in business, and you wouldn't deny a partner in business that, by conventional standards, you wouldn't deny them knowledge about what the product is and how it works. They're too important to your business. And yet the customer, who is your only financial resource, comes up short. We give them a short shift. Hi, how are you? $2, thank you, next. We can't do that.
The key to getting pourable foam, which you need to make latte art, is to have a nice velvety consistency, which means you have to get your milk to turn over when you're making your lattes. And the way to do that, I've found, is to hook the steam wand into the nozzle of the pitcher, turn the steam on, and keep the nozzle just below the surface of the milk, which will give you a natural rolling motion and inject foam at intervals, giving you a very pourable foam. While I'm doing this, I keep one hand on the side of the pitcher in order to gauge the temperature. And when it becomes too hot for me to hold, I simply turn off the foamer, wipe it off, and bleed the steam wand to get the excess milk out. Before we pour our drink, what we want to do is mix the foam back in with the milk to give us the maximum pourable consistency. To do this, I simply move the pitcher back and forth, and the milk will mix the foam in. And when I pour, I move the cup back towards me, pour the milk in slowly while moving the pitcher back and forth, and then follow all the way across to complete the heart design.
Ma il caffè cremoso, perfetto. Adesso faccio un bel cuoricino. Bella.
How is the preparation of espresso affecting the quality of the cup, and how is this quality affecting the future of this market? We had in the past in Britain, in the 50s, a sudden flare of espresso. Espresso became very popular, and it remained there for 4 or 5 years, and then it vanished. Why? Simply because the quality of the espresso prepared in this moment was below the expectancy of a population of consumer becoming more and more sophisticated and more educated. But the biggest error was in the preparation. The majority of the bar in Britain in this moment were producing a very unpleasant cup brewed in maybe 6 or 10 seconds, so it was just colored water. We need to respect the basic of the concept of espresso, which is using a machine that has a big power of extraction to extract 25% of the substances in the bed of particles in a time around 20 to 30 seconds, and a volume of approximately 30 to maximum 40 milliliters.
There are a lot of people out there that don't know what they're doing, that have been given a minimal amount of information. And in the start of this industry, as we now know it, what we can call Seattle style, if you will, this industry started with very little information, people kind of reinventing the wheel, doing it enthusiastically, making a lot of money in a hurry, no other standard to compare it to, better than the drip coffee they were getting at home, and it's evolved, and we've learned. We started to add a little bit of tradition. We started to add knowledge. We've solidified in a general interest now that's spread all over the country. People understand it in general. Now the beginners that didn't take the time to learn and become skilled are falling out. And we're watching the turnover. And as that happens, people are migrating towards quality. As the consumer migrates towards quality, we as business operators have to migrate towards quality, constantly learn, constantly build, and make it better.
So I find growth in the specialty coffee industry not through quantity, but through quality. And quality is so often misinterpreted. What does quality mean? Quality means an immense amount of work, no matter how long you've been around, in research and development, in innovation, in creativity, in completing that picture to adapt it to changing markets, in completing that picture of taste so that you can educate others, not because you want to stuff it down their throat, but because they want it, they're eager for it. And so I see growth not horizontal, but I see growth vertically. And what I mean by that, there's so much growth that all of us, retailers and roasters, can do within our own existing customer base. There's so much growth that we can do through education, through taste, through the experience. There's so much more we can do in customizing the experience to each and every individual that walks into their door, because they are now ready for it. The market is ready for it. And the responsibility of evolution, of creativity, of innovation, of research and development, of customization for these people rests on our shoulders. Another trend that scares me as relative to this is a trend where just because people have been baristas for a few years or roasters for a few years, they think they have nothing else to learn anymore. They are the best. They're now the artists. We all can learn every day. The point in time we stop learning in the specialty coffee industry, that is the point in time we stop our growth.
As you have now seen, elevating your espresso beverages to a level above your competition requires a clear understanding of specific principles and an unwavering dedication to quality. Simply learning the mechanics is not enough. You must pride yourself on consistently preparing and serving beverages of uncompromising quality. To elevate your performance to that of a master barista, you will need to possess a passion for excellence. Your customers will appreciate the effort, and your rewards will be immeasurable. Thank you for joining us.
Immediately following these credits, find out about other fine products and services available from Bellissimo. Bellissimo proudly presents Coffee Universe, the final frontier in coffee industry websites. www.coffeeuniverse.com is the definitive specialty coffee website. The new Espresso 101. This award-winning one-hour video has been totally reshot and digitally re-edited for the next millennium. Already, the definitive industry video training tool, the new Espresso 101, contains more detailed information and has been expanded to include the fundamentals of proper drip coffee preparation. This video tool will reduce training time by up to 70%, while in most cases providing a more thoroughly trained employee than if trained by conventional methods. In this informative video, the viewer will learn about a brief history of coffee, understanding the coffee bean from seed to export, the roasting and blending of coffee, espresso equipment, extracting perfect espresso, the fine art of steaming and foaming milk, preparing espresso bar beverages, fundamentals of drip coffee preparation, and finally, equipment maintenance, cleaning, and safety. Each video package includes a study guide, multiple choice test with answer key, and a barista diploma. Espresso 101 has been endorsed by the Specialty Coffee Association of America, as well as many of the specialty coffee industry's top professionals. Spilling the beans. Join the experts for 45 minutes exploring the world of specialty coffee. This video is ideal for individuals who are considering opening their own retail specialty coffee business and those who are new to the industry. Learn about important factors which contribute to the creation and operation of a successful coffee business, such as typical investment required, location considerations, cost factors, and profit potential. Veterans of the business relate their first-hand experiences, providing invaluable information and ideas. Spilling the beans is like taking a week-long tour through the U.S. hotbed of coffee, the Pacific Northwest. The Art of Coffee. This 65-minute consumer video is designed to entertain and introduce the viewer to the world of coffee. An ideal product to sell from specialty coffee operations, The Art of Coffee will help your customers understand how to select, store, and properly prepare coffee, maximizing their enjoyment of the beverage. This video will help stimulate your sales of bulk beans, brewing devices, and coffee accessories. The extensive in-kitchen brewing section will provide the viewer with detailed instruction for drip brewing, making espresso, and demonstrate the preparation of a wide variety of beverages. The Art of Coffee is the perfect addition to any holiday coffee gift basket. Bean Business Basics, the definitive how-to business manual for the specialty coffee business. This 650-page encyclopedia provides detailed information about virtually every aspect of the product, business startup, and ongoing operations. Bean Business Basics will lead the reader down a path to success while helping them avoid the potholes of costly or fatal business mistakes. The authors possess 40 years of combined retail and food service experience, including knowledge gained from owning their own successful specialty coffee operations and by helping hundreds of consulting clients off to successful starts. This 39-chapter manual includes such information as evaluating coffees through cupping, selecting a coffee roaster, proper brewing principles, determining a concept by your financial resources, selecting the right location, strategies of negotiating a lease, planning your menu, design of your coffee bar, bureaucracies and red tape, purchasing equipment, hiring and managing employees, establishing budgets and cost controls, marketing your business, achieving profitability, and much, much more. Bean Business Basics includes sample menus, store designs, and a full set of ready-to-use operational forms. Bean Business Basics is another quality product created by Bellissimo and has been endorsed by the Specialty Coffee Association of America. Sip Art. Bellissimo now offers 3 volumes of coffee-specific clip art for your computer. Volumes 1 through 3 contain 90-plus original images. Save thousands in designer fees and add pizzazz to your menus, flyers, advertising, website, or point-of-sale marketing. New from Bellissimo Sip Art Countries of Origin. This new computer clip art program features over 50 artistic representations of the major producing nations of the world. Ideal for bulk bean bags and bins, the images from countries of origin will create a mystique and appeal, boosting your bulk bean sales. Now you can have the same marketing punch of the big boys with countries of origin. All Sip Art is available for both PC and Macintosh platforms. Sip Art images consist of files that are compatible with nearly all word processing, draw, and paint programs. Bellissimo offers a wide variety of books from some of the most highly respected authors in the world of coffee. Contact Bellissimo for a full list of available titles. Bellissimo Consulting Services. They will maximize your chances of success by helping you make the right decisions. They can save you time and money by preventing costly mistakes. Bellissimo is a full-service consulting company. For more information about consulting services or any of the aforementioned quality products, call Bellissimo or check out our website at www.espresso101.com.